Well, I'm back again with a brand new set of free StreamYard minutes to make do with what I will. And obviously tonight I'm joined by the Saxon again, but he's outnumbered on the stream as I'm joined by a fellow Scotsman. And it's a pleasure to have a Scot on stream again. I'm getting a bit tired of Sensums humorless jokes. The jokophobia is too much. But tedious affair at times. No, take the piss. But obviously, as you can see from the title of the stream, we've got Dr. Bruce Scott on, and he's somebody who's been relatively prolific over the last few months in, helping to call out these critical race theorists, which seems to be. So it's been a pretty difficult task over the months to gain some traction, and he's picked up the mantle. There's been a few others over the course of the past few months, but I think it'll be relatively good to have him on, hence the invite to get his perspective on things. But before I come to him, I better introduce the Saxon question. How are you doing, Saxon?
Oh, I'm all right, mate. I had to nip out earlier on. I started to watch old Rags' stream because he had Chief Moody on, and then I had to nip out for half an hour. So I literally got in about 5 minutes before going live, which is remiss of me. I took a little bit longer than I thought, but yeah, I'm doing okay. I did a bit of a couple of streams last night, one with Bonnie Lad, just an impromptu hour-long stream, and then I did basically a news merchant-y type affair after that. So yeah, everything's champion. Work's been a bit shy. Well, I don't know what's going on. I have a it's a bit like old Luke Skywalker when they're going near the Death Star. I have a strange feeling about this. There's something going on. There's something going on. I'm hoping I still got a bringing job by Christmas because I actually still need one, unfortunately.
Yeah, I know that feeling. Well, and anyway, I might as well get to it. This is the first time that I've had a man of this caliber on the stream before. It's quite well known, whether it's on UK Column or just in general. Dr. Bruce, how are you doing, Gudgy?
I'm all right. Yeah, it's a pleasure. It's a pleasure to come on. I haven't been in many Scottish YouTube or podcaster things. I've been quite good. I'm good friends with the Irish actually. I've been on the Gran Torino quite a lot the last couple of years, and because so Scotland's it's a funny one. I thought there are channels like yourself and No Chance and of course, well, there's David Scott from the UK Column, so he has a channel as well. But I think your channels like yourself are very important because you see, it's so bureaucratic what we're experiencing with this critical race theory. It's one tentacle of the whole picture, but
yeah,
it's so bureaucratic, and you work, I work, Sensum works. We've got lives, and so for us to sort of think about these things and read the documents and critique them and stuff, it takes up a lot of our time, and then so to have these channels and stuff is very important. But the thing is, what's so pernicious about them? And it's globally, it's happening, with all this idea of online hate speech and harm bills and Jacinda Ahern, they try to criminalise extremism, and in Ireland there's a lot of the extreme government document, think tank documents funded by Soros, identifying people like Gran Torino and Dave Cullen in Ireland for being extremists. So essentially, they're trying to demonize ordinary people like ourselves who are just speaking up. We're not. This is not our job. This is just we're witnessing what's happening in our society, and it's almost like we're not allowed to critique it.
Yeah. No, I agree. Especially in a Scottish context, I don't think there's enough people actually speaking out. But granted, on the other side of that, I mean, if you do speak out, you always run the risk of just getting booted off platforms. I'm quite surprised. I'm still on YouTube, in all honesty. I've been on it for some time. But before I gained any traction, I was, as far as I'm aware, I was the only Scottish YouTuber there was. There's another guy, there's a Glaswegian guy called Goodfella, but he just kind of takes the mick out of stupid articles and whatnot. He doesn't really do any deep dives of that. Then No Chance obviously came along. There was Calamity, but I don't know what the hell happened to him, to be honest. Like, the said about that the better, but just very few and far between Scottish voices. Really, I've always tried to encourage people that I speak to on Telegram and that are Scottish to maybe consider making channels and stuff, because I think the more voices the better. And in all honesty, England's got a myriad of different voices from all over the place, but seem to be very scarce up here in Scotland.
I remember a few years ago, before the COVID thing happened, I remember the furore with millennial woes who got doxxed by some radical feminist lefties in Scotland, and the police turned up at his house in Scotland.
Yeah, I remember seeing the photos. Right outside his front door. It's enough to put anybody off, in all honesty, because it can lead to life ruination. But I don't know. So I guess it's a gamble you've got to take, really, because at the end of the day, if none of us speak out, then this stuff just goes completely unnoticed. Because even the subject at hand tonight, which is mainly just the critical race theory stuff, I knew that they had implemented in 2021, the S&P census spoke about an anti-racist education, but it was very vague in nature. And little did I know that what they were really planning was this building racial literacy program. And it was purely by chance that I stumbled across that one day by clicking on the wrong tab on the Scottish Government's website. And I ended up stumbling across newly released minutes that they must have just updated then and there while I was on their website. So I just started having a wee look through it, and I was absolutely baffled by what I seen, which I will pull up at some point as well tonight, because after I started to cover it, within a week, they'd scrubbed that off their website in its entirety. But it said it right there in black and white that they've got this program called it's abbreviated to REREP, which is like Race Equality Action Plan or words to that effect. But it said in the small print that they were planning to overhaul the education system and rebuild it with a critical race theory framework. And I could not believe my eyes. Fast forward a week and it's gone off their website. Now, was I responsible for that? I don't know, but somebody might have taken my video and shared it elsewhere, and they're responsible for it being pulled. But the facts remain that it was there in black and white. And then when you look at the panels of all the people that are involved with the reformation of our curriculum, it's as clear as day that what we're seeing right now is not anti-racism that's been implemented in a curriculum science context. It's critical race theory. So that's what worries me, really, because it just seems to be going for the longest time now. It's just been flying under the radar, irrespective of how hard I've tried to push it all this year. It just, I don't know. People hear the term anti-racist and they just assume, oh, what's wrong with being opposed to racism? That's not what it is. It's critical race theory, and it's anti-white. It's directed at white children. I know the argument can be made that you can take the ideology of critical race theory and you could apply it to any country in the world. Yeah, you could, but they're not. They're doing it here to white children. So that's our children. That's my son. That's kids.
I mean, I kind of started to put my head above the parapet before COVID, regards Scottish education with the LGBT inclusive education stuff. In that a lot of it was highly age inappropriate. And the sex education stuff, and also the mental health stuff in schools was basically it was basically trying to in what's the best word to do it. They were exposing children to highly sexualized material, which was age inappropriate for their emotional development for their age, and they were also in educating children to problematize their minds, so that so it was like they seen their minds as a psychopathology. There was something psychopathologically wrong in them. They had like resilience training and things like that, which is basically cognitive behavioral therapy in schools. And that and as I have got a background in psychology. I work as a psychoanalyst now, and essentially I was like, this is out of order. They are tampering with children's minds, and so I thought I had a duty to I felt like I had a kind of moral moral civic duty, or I don't know what, but to speak out and say, because so many people weren't, and especially in the mental health professions, and so so when there's lots to talk about, but my premise with the critical race theory is and I've got some background a little bit in that from when I did my PhD many years ago now, well, 20 years ago now, less maybe. Essentially, the critical race theories in Scotland, what they're saying is, you can summarise it, but what they're saying is, little white boys and girls in Scotland, right, have got some sort of psychopathological lack or sort of deviancy in their minds, whatever, bias, and they need to be, we need to go into the schools and correct this pathology in them. I mean, that in itself is, I would say, it's abuse.
Yeah. No, I'd agree. Absolutely agree. I just think it's absolutely abhorrent. I mean, as you mentioned there, the fact, I mean, we've been putting up with this nonsense for years in terms of all the sort of, the constant of white privilege this, white privilege that, the constant attacks, about, oh, you're cisgender white male, all this nonsense. But they've now taken it a step too far, as far as I'm concerned, when they start going after the children. There is not one example that I could deem, reasonable justification for why they're doing this. Like, no excuse under the sun, irrespective of how hard they try to justify it. I just think it's absolutely repulsive. And some of the stuff that I've read, some of the rhetoric that I've heard come from these people when they're talking, it's just odious. It's truly odious. I mean, I think on that note, just the latest for anybody that hasn't seen my video that I uploaded yesterday, the way that this website works, you only get like access to one article a month, so I won't be able to pull it up again, but I can just share the screen briefly to show you what Education Scotland is now saying about people like myself for having the temerity to call out critical race theory. They are now, well, I'll let the headline speak for itself. This was Education Scotland, Gail Gorman, who's the chief of, where is it? So many tabs open. She's the chief of Education Scotland, which is obviously where this building racial literacy program is effectively, that's where it was born. But it says here, anti-racist education emboldened after white supremacist attacks. Recent abhorrent online racist attacks have only increased determination to build racial literacy in Scottish schools, said Education Scotland boss. So this is where we're at now, where if you call out critical race theory, you are deemed a white supremacist. It's like it's the hyperbole that they use. They've been doing this since all that momentum from a couple of months ago, where they were really being held to task over some of the stuff they were saying on their Twitters before they privated them all. They couldn't answer any of these points that were being put to them, so they just went on the defensive, insinuated that they were being abused and harassed and targeted by racists, and naturally that led to the SNP conference, where we had a myriad of politicians taking to the stage to express their disdain for the evil racists. And then we have, this is the latest example here, so you're a white supremacist, apparently. It's not the first time I've been called that, despite the fact I'm not. But if you're going to call me a white supremacist for having an issue with the concept of building racial literacy, targeting little children, then fine, I'll own that label, in all honesty.
So it's essentially, what this I read that article earlier. What this article is actually saying is, it's a gaslighting. It's basically saying, because you're calling out, you're calling out the fact that there's no evidence of white supremacy, but like a good abuser, they invent a slur word like white supremacist, which is based on very little or nothing at all, and turn it into demonization, because you or other people are calling out the fact that they're going into schools telling our children, right, people's children, they're somehow racist. They've got some unconscious bias, and it's very
Yeah.
interesting. This ideology of unconscious bias is rife in critical race theory. 20 years ago, when I was doing my PhD, there was a test, a sort of computer task that people were doing research on to measure unconscious bias. It was called the implicit association test, and I used it in part of my PhD to measure unconscious kind of beliefs. And a lot of researchers used it for race, to look at unconscious bias in race. That was over 20 years ago. And then it was totally debunked, the test, because it was like, well, you know, if you're a white person or a black person or whatever, you're going to have an in-group bias. But having an in-group bias is not a negative thing. Having an in-group bias is a normal thing. It's not something that's not inherently racist. It's just part of life. And so when you know, if a white person, you know, in this test has the case, they have more familiarity with white things or white things in their culture, etc. Well, Japanese people will have exactly the same for their culture. Does that mean the Japanese are racist? Doesn't mean the Japanese are racist. It just means the Japanese are Japanese.
Mhm.
And so they construe it as some sort of again inherent pathology and whiteness. You know, the fact that they're using the term that Khadija Mohammed in that article that he sent me, conversations about racism and whiteness are missing whiteness. I mean, straight away, that I would say that title of the article is racist straight away. You know, it's got a racist tone to it.
Oh, without a doubt. Without a doubt. That's something that I've tried to point out in quite a lot of the videos that I make regarding these people. Like, they always, and it's not limited to them. I mean, the S&P themselves do it. You know, they always sort of sugarcoat their malevolent policies with, you know, wet white language. And the anti-racists, as they call themselves, critical race theorists, but, you know, they do the same thing. It's always sugar-coated as, and they try to fluff it up so it doesn't sound as bad. But you just like read between the lines, and all the time it becomes pretty clear that there's, for maybe not all of them, but a good portion of them, there is disdain. Absolutely is disdain for whiteness, and I mean, even their ideology seems to be predicated on the notion, obviously, that race doesn't exist. Whiteness is a concept that white people created in order to justify enslaving all the non-whites around the world. So we're just simply attacking whiteness. It's the concept of whiteness that we're going after. We don't hate white people. It's just whiteness. But no, it's the same thing. Like, they're attacking white people, but they disguise it as going after the concept of whiteness. You know? Like,
Yeah.
And another term as well that I was going to say there when you brought up is microaggressions. This is a new term now, and I can't take the term seriously, admittedly, but it's a term that seems to be gaining a lot of momentum, you know. And I just think it's laughable, really. But this is their newest definition of racism. So that can be literally anything. You can stare at them in a funky manner, and that could generate microaggressions because of your racist stare. Like, I feel like a lab rat half the time, in all honesty, the way that they speak about us.
It's a little tactic, I think, to justify demonizing anyone who criticizes them. You know, they say, oh, well, racism doesn't have to be like an overt racist attack on someone verbally or physically. It can be some microaggression, some sort of unconscious thing that a white person has done, you know, that is so hurtful to another person of a black and ethnic minority. And you know, but it's like, you know, so but you could say exactly the same thing about Khadija Mohammed in an article on the first page, that article of conversations about race and whiteness are missing within education in Scotland. She talks about laments how she's like one of the only black and ethnic minority teachers in her school, etc., etc. although, well, I said, well, I mean, I don't know the exact demographic of Scotland, but I'm thinking, well, the possibilities of a Muslim female, being a teacher in a school, the probability of that, because of the demographics, got to be pretty low.
Yeah.
Because most the demographic is predominantly white, and so, well, you're not going to get many Muslims teachers in the schools. But that's not a facet of racism. That's just a facet of the demographic.
Yeah, but they've even got answers for that now as well. I mean, that's one of the tabs I've got open is one of their Padlets, with the one that generated the initial shitstorm, shall we say, on Twitter, which led them all to start privating their Twitters. But one of the documents that's included within that Padlet was some working group from several years ago, which was trying to diversify the teaching workforce in Scotland, but they wanted to be proportionate representation. So at the time, it was obviously, according to the 2011 census, 96% white, 4% non-white. So that meant that they had to have 4% at least. And it's always at least. I find that remarkable. So it'd be fine if it was 20%, babe. But because it's under 4%, that needs to change. It has to be at least 4%. And because it's not 4% as of yet, that's racist. It's just remarkable. Like, everything's racist. But I'm saying, I don't know if you want to jump in, like, before I start going through this a wee bit. Have you got anything to add to that? Like,
well, I've actually got a question.
you go, guys.
For Bruce, if that's okay.
Huh?
I mean, I know that DJ's gone through the materials, but I mean, we're talking about the teachers who are going to be teaching it, but the racical crit theory, as I call it, the actual content, is the content in the material that they teach just embedded NLP, the neuro-linguistic programming, if you believe in such a thing, and is it essentially just sort of Manchurian Candidate type stuff to sort of convince kids to lionize the other or the outer, the people from without, but vilify their own?
Well, is that a question for? I'm not familiar with the actual teaching materials as such, but I could hazard a guess that from a knowledge of the LGBT inclusive education is that it's a sort of a teaching materials which will be used to interrogate whiteness on many different levels. Your white privilege, looking at history, colonialism, feeling guilty for the sins of not even your father, from just people in the past, and it's bloody awful when you think about it. It's utterly absurd.
I don't know if you can see my screen. Sorry to interject there, but that's part of the answer to your question, Sensum. Nobody knows. It's all hidden. You can't access that information unless you're part of the program.
Well, that tells you everything you need to know, doesn't it?
Yeah, but this is where they've fallen short, though, because their old website which I've got on another tab as well, is the Anti-Racist Educator. All the people that made that website are now the same people promoting this shit. And you get an idea as to what they believe, and then from that you can then start to do your own deep dives into some of the other stuff that they've said elsewhere, and it all becomes pretty clear, like, who we're dealing with here. But the program as it stands in its current form, the only real information that I've ever been able to obtain is via little snippets here and there that they've put out on their Twitters before they all blocked them, private them, sorry. But the vast majority of it is hidden behind the equivalent of a paywall. As it says there, the program content is delivered live via online webinars, and the rest of the program content is shared in the online program area that is restricted to registered participants. And I did try to register for their second round because they're on their second cohort now. I did try to register last time around. I filed my application and whatnot, but it's effectively hit or miss. Everybody that sent in an application, it was just at random. They were picking people, so I never got picked. I did bullshit. I didn't tell them my real name of that. You know what I mean? I gave them some sort of stereotypical BAME name. But
You should have, you should have put in a name that was foreign female sounding.
Yeah, probably. but I mean, I might as well
and you should have put if you put in the request. Can you send me one with large text because I'm partially sighted as well? So you get the full gamut. You've got the BAME, you've got the female, and you've got the raspberry quotient.
Sorry, go on.
Yeah, I was just reading some of the things, the building racial literacy. It's so kind of airy fairy and kind of and intangible what they're getting at, but essentially it reeks of cultural Marxism and confessional groups, in these kind of very cult-like manipulative groups called T groups or sensitivity groups that were in the 1960s. And they're run with a leader, the group, which could be the teacher. And so what this reeks of is getting these very vulnerable little people, children, and getting them to start chatting about race in groups in the classroom setting. And it reeks of manipulation. It reeks of they're being manipulated without the consent of their parents as well. It's very I think it's very abusive, and cultural Marxism. It looks like a personalized action plan to lead anti-racist change. That it's like they're always trying to create a problem that's not there. I mean, Khadija Mohammed in that article, she said in the first page of that article, my experience as a BME educator. She talks about, quoting her words here, conversations exploring my cultural, linguistic, and religious identities were not encouraged. They were simply not acknowledged. And I'm like, well, I used to live and work in London. And I worked in a lot of places, but I was the only white person there. And I worked with people with all different types of races. And, I never had any problems, It was like, but I was like, no one encouraged me to talk about my Scottishness or my whiteness when I was in this one place. This one place I remember I was the only white member of staff that was like not mentioned. It was like, so is that problematic? No, it wasn't problematic. We were just people working in a place. What color of skin we were wasn't an issue. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There's no problem.
And it's like they always seem to, well, especially Khadija Mohammed, but it's no limited to just her though. But they do that. They point at things because there's always this emphasis on you probably heard the term Eurocentric. That's something that's coming up quite often now. They're haranguing our education system for being too Eurocentric, and that's always just gone without saying because this is Scotland. Like, why would it be anything else? But these people are complaining now because they're not seeing themselves in the education system, and they're picking fault with that and coming up with explanations as to why they don't see themselves in the education system, while failing to address the elephant in the room, which is Scotland's historically white. Therefore, it's going to be, by extension, Eurocentric. But they just pick fault with the most random of things and run with that narrative. And because there's never any pushback, there's never any rebuttals or whatnot, they're allowed to just say the most ludicrous of statements, and it passes as truth.
What the strangest thing is, these people, these critical race theorists like Khadija Mohammed and other people in the SNP and the other groups, they support Sturgeon SNP and their policies with lockdown and their COVID, the regulation powers about forced quarantine and vaccination for people. If you read the policies on that, they're quite horrific. It's medical fascism. The lockdown, for example. Now, a lot of critical race theorists will talk about how Black and ethnic minorities are predominantly in poorer poorer housing, poorer areas, less opportunities, blah, blah, blah. Now, that may be the case, right? That may be the case. Now, if so, the lockdowns would have harmed these people more so. But yet, they supported lockdown. So essentially, they're punishing black and ethnic minorities.
Yeah.
You see what I mean?
Hi, and funnily enough, on that they've even got a. It might even show you in this video here because this was a video where I first stumbled across the reference to the critical race theory stuff. But if I can get it to the start, it might be here actually. If not, I do have it. Oh yeah. The Scottish Government's Race Equality and Anti-Racism in Education programme was established in response to the significant amount of correspondence received by the Deputy First Minister as part of the Black Lives Matter movement, and one of the recommendations made by the COVID-19 ethnicity expert group seeking to include the teaching of Black history in the curriculum. Just on your point there, because they did make a lot of claims back in 2020, especially that, you know, the Blacks were disproportionately affected by the lockdowns, etc. And of course, that was used as proof, more proof that everything's racist. But as a result, in Scotland anyway, this was born, the COVID-19 ethnicity expert group. I've made a video on all of their recommendations, and some of the things that they say, you wouldn't, well, you might believe it, but it's hard to take seriously. They even go as far as to say that maybe they were more susceptible to COVID as adults because they were somebody was racist to them when they were children, and it's what's the word they use? What's that? Internalized. There you go, internalized racism, and it's affected them to a point where they're now more susceptible to illnesses. That is the sort of stuff that they were saying as part of this group. But put that to one side for a second. Why is a COVID-19 ethnicity expert group making recommendations regarding COVID? And one of the recommendations is that we should include Black history in the curriculum. What? But of course, that got accepted in full by Christina McKelvey. But if you come, this is the thing I was on about where, and there's Kajita right there, where, and Melina, Education Scotland, and Nazuki Damani, another critical race theorist. Well, half of them are critical race theorists, to be fair. But this is what's now scrapped off their website, the Scottish Government's website. This is still here, curriculum reform subgroup. But if you come down to their vision, and there's it there, in all its glory, the subgroup has a vision that Scotland's schools and early learning environments will promote and embed racial equity, anti-racism, and global citizenship through its systems, leadership, and curriculum using a critical race theory framework. All of our learners and the people that support them will benefit from a curriculum, culture, and ethos that reflects the diversity of the early learning, which is nursery, and school community, Scotland and the wider world. The curriculum will include the historical and current influence in society and culture and the contribution of people of colour and people with a racialised identity in a positive and empowered way. Now, obviously, racialised identity, that's played into the notion that race doesn't exist, because that's what they perpetuate and claim. The role of Scotland in the UK in colonial history and the impact it has in the modern world will feature in teaching and learning to ensure our young people have an understanding and awareness of the impact of colonialism, including the UK's role in enslavement and other human rights violations past and present. But obviously, anti-racism, racial equity, global citizenship, all the buzzwords. But this here, critical race theory framework. And naturally, if you go onto their website now, which is here, and we'll just go down to curriculum reform for anybody that's not seen this before, and I'll just show you. It's gone now. Imagine my shock. It's been completely scrapped now. But yeah, so this is all you get now. You get the panel, or they're all there. The vast majority of them are critical race theorists. But this is all you get now, where it says the curriculum reform subgroup identified early on the need to review the existing curriculum framework to seek opportunities to meaningfully embed and articulate race equality and anti-racism, and to establish the key principles and features of any future curriculum reform. So that's a stark contrast to what it says there. You know, that's their vision. They're talking openly about a critical race theory framework. Fast forward just a week after I uploaded that video, and lo and behold, this is what you get now. So it does make you wonder, like, what's going on here?
In many respects, they make all these sounds out that they're anti-racist and anti. They're wanting to look at black history and colonialism. And there's so much about the rhetoric that I don't buy, because I recently I was on Sonia Poulton the other day talking about globalism, because globalism is now an anti-Semitic thing word to use if you're a global, because it's basically people who are criticizing Agenda 2030 and sustainable development in the World Economic Forum, but essentially globalism is there's a Russian philosopher called Alexander Dugan. His daughter was recently assassinated, allegedly by Ukrainian special services, and he's demonized. This guy Dugan's demonized in the West. He's called the brain of Putin and all that sort of stuff. But anyways, he's very critical of the World Economic Forum Agenda 2030, and he should be, because he basically says that I'll quote his words here. He says that this globalism essentially is a form based on it's anti-Christian, it's anti-spiritual, it's anti-tradition, it's anti-sacred, and so it's anti-nation state, etc., etc. And essentially, it is a form of colonialism, because he says it's a homogenization of the world. Now, all these critical race theories in Scotland, they support World Economic Forum, Agenda 2030, sustainable development, the global citizenship, and all that sort of buzzwords. But essentially, it is a form of colonialism they're supporting. So, in a sense, they're erasing even their own culture and own history, etc., etc. Inadvertently, it makes you think of that term, the useful idiot. All they're doing, because it's essentially a kind of, as I said, cultural Marxist kind of ideology, or some would say, fascist. It's corporate. There's big tech involved in the Great Reset sort of thing idea. But essentially, it's this is another book of a Russian philosopher called Igor Shevarevich, called The Socialist Phenomenon, and he talks about how this what's happening now in the world, in what Scotland's adopting policy wise, is the abolition of private property, the lockdown. They're putting businesses people out of their businesses out in bankrupt, including black and ethnic and minority businesses, small and medium-sized businesses. Abolition of the family. Well, they're queering the family. They're challenging, interrogating heteronormativity. Abolition of religion. Well, they want to get rid of Christianity, but they'll come for the Muslims as well, as the Muslims in Birmingham found out when they wanted to take their kids out the sex education in the schools. And it's this kind of criminalization of any sort of criminalization of what the perceived privilege, and it's utterly what we're seeing is the destruction of culture and the criminalization of critical thought.
Oh man, I agree. What sense you got any of that? Like, see what.
No, mate, I think you've exhausted it. But it's once again, it just goes to show you the utter contempt that Scotland's government has for its own Indigenous people. It's absolutely shocking. They are continually, which is like I say, they are continually putting the outer or the other before themselves. Now, you tell me, and that's endemic across the West and the wider Anglosphere, but you tell me any other society out of that bubble or any other nation where they don't favour their own people. It is the default setting and had been for, thousands of years. But all of a sudden, these last sort of 30 years with this accelerated sort of Gramscian march through the institutions, it's now flipped on its head. We need to be pontificating and fawning over every single person around the world that's not our own people. It's an absolute inversion of reality. It's just terrible.
Sorry, carry on.
On you go, guys.
No, well, it's like at the moment with the critical race theory in Scotland, it's like if you're white, it means you're a sinner, and it's the same with feminism. It's like the feminism thing is, if you're a man, you're a sinner, or if you're heterosexual male, you're a sinner, and it's this sort of demonization of certain portions of the population, very divisive, and it's that I think that's fascinating in a society, in a government like Sturgeon's and other governments down the world like how are following the globalist thing is this idea of because it's very anti-Christian, because we in Christian kind of culture, originally this idea we're all sinners, in a Christian sort of idea of things. But of course, when you bring in these critical race theories, this postmodernism, suddenly some people are less sinners than others, and the real sinners have to be punished. That's a real inversion of moral and ethics in from a Christian perspective, and I think that's very sinister indeed. I mean, regarding another Scottish government initiative that I've seen. I don't know if it was in your channel, DJ, but that was maybe it was Mr. No Chance, actually. I think it was him. They were talking about conversion therapy and how they wanted to get rid of all conversion therapies. And I don't think they understand what conversion is. They certainly don't understand what therapy is. But they talked about how prayer, Christian prayer, was very harmful, and I thought that was fascinating because if you look at the in biblical Greek, the word for prayer is they have different kind of verbs. In the verb for prayer is what's called a middle verb. So when you pray, it's not regarded as someone doing an action. It's there's another person involved. In other words, God is involved, and so it's not something you do that there's only one person involved. So yet they're talking about wanting to criminalize prayer. Essentially, what they're saying in those sentences, whether they know it or not, is they're demonizing a Christian worldview, right? And basically criminalizing basically if you want to call it the telephone line to God. And I think that is highly interesting from a cultural perspective. That's what they're saying.
Can I just say one thing about what you mentioned there? And I'm not saying this is real or factual, but I remember an interview that a chap called James Dellingpole did, and I wish I was good enough to just be able to go and zoom straight to either the Odyssey or the BitChute video where it was. But he was speaking to a clinical psychiatrist, so he was a medical psychiatrist that was working effectively in an asylum. I don't know what the polite term is these days, if you're still allowed to call them asylums, but essentially it was for the criminally insane. And this bloke was speaking to people who had, multiple personality disorder and schizophrenia and that. And whenever they were exposed to Christianity, whether it was either prayer or some form of sermon, they got absolutely out of control, outrageously out of control, as though it was, this looks. I don't know what the correlation is, but they didn't like it. And it turned them crackers. It said, I say that I've been disingenuous, but you get these people, you get people in for interviews, and they say, it's constantly forever. The voices were telling these patients not to engage with this doctor, and if they did, they'd make it even worse for them. They continually told these people to kill themselves. That was a big theme. And like I say, when anything religious, anything Christian was involved, it was sort of like it was sort of like an anathema to the affliction that they were getting. Now, yeah, it sounds all a bit The Omen and a bit how can I put it, a bit out there. But he said, I can't explain it. He said, I don't know if these people are just, that's part of the reaction or whatever. He says, but it seemed to be, there seemed to be some form of unexplainable correlation between these very, very mentally ill people and the dislike and the what's the word I'm looking to, the repulsion, the aversion to anything to do with Christianity, which I found quite amazing.
Yeah, well, I mean, we get into a very religious or spiritual discussion, I suppose. But I don't know if that DJ would want to go down that road. But yeah, well, I suppose some more religious-minded people would believe in that idea of demonic attack. I have met people who said they've been attacked by demons or etc. It's I mean, you look at some of the initiatives that's happening in the world at the moment, the globalist things, especially the transhumanism thing. It has a very dark thing to it, of merging human beings with technology. I mean, it's very interesting. How will the critical race theorists take to the transhumanism debate? Of course, because if you start to integrate technology into human beings, then you're altering the race of the person. Well, is that a form of racism then? I don't think these critical race theories are particularly switched on enough to realize exactly what's happening in the world. I think that's why they're more like useful idiots. I don't, because like any regime, Alexander Solzhenitsyn talks about this. The Russian author who spent 10 years in a Russian gulag. Yeah. He says, even under totalitarian communism, the people who pushed it, the people who are the members of the party, blah blah blah, even they ended up in the gulag. They came for them in the end. They came for them. They don't really care about whether you're LGBT or you're black and ethnic minority. And at the end of the day, you'll just be put in the gulag like the rest of us.
Yeah, absolutely. And well, that's the thing with communism. Literally, communism doesn't give a shit about the proles, doesn't care less about the poor man or the working man. It's just that they absolutely hate the rich. That's communism. That's the way that it is. They don't care about the poor. They don't care about the well-being of people as a rule. They just hate the rich. That's literally where it's coming from. And in the chat, Alphabet Cat found the name of the psychiatrist. The psychiatrist in question is a chap called Jerry Mazinski. He's the one who had the conversation with James Delingpole. Like I say, he took it from a completely scientific. He just said, all I'm saying is that there is in the people I was treating at the time, who suffered from multiple personality disorders or, chronic schizophrenia, there seemed to be a direct correlation between them becoming completely incensed by any form of Christian religiosity, whether it be the spoken word or symbols or so. I don't know. Can't read anything into it. He just said that there was definitely a correlation there, even if it was rather than a supernatural one, even if it was sort of like a psychological one. So, but yeah, so I'm sorry, DJ, I'll pass that back because you've got some other bits and bobs you want to get onto, mate.
No, you're all right. Like, obviously, because I said before we went live, because I've not been 100% in terms of health-wise right now, I've not really got everything set up the way I ordinarily would have. But obviously, there's a few things that I do want to get across just for anybody that's like, because I've got a lot more views than I normally do, in fairness. So there might be some curious heads that have popped over and I've advertised this as talking about critical race taste, so I better show some of this stuff, you know. But I'm going to mute my mic for like 2 minutes and play, because this is like a 4-minute video, but I'll only play about 2 minutes of it. And this was their first introductory video on Education Scotland. This is how they were justifying this to begin with. But after that, obviously some of the tabs and that I've got open, I didn't actually find this. I went right over my head, but somebody pointed it out to me. On Education Scotland's website, they make reference to a particular individual who, upon looking up this individual, we get a bit more insight as to what we're dealing with here. So we'll get to that in due course. But I'll share my screen now, and I'll play a bit of this video. Let me just see which tab it's on. Right, sound. Okay. I don't know why music just came on there. That's not what's supposed to have happened. That was well, fucking. I don't even listen to Coldplay. Why did Coldplay pop up?
I swear to God, if you play any Coldplay on this channel, I'll never.
I don't listen to Coldplay. That was the most bizarre thing. There we go.
Very bad music choice. That. Yeah.
Oh, no.
Whiny preachy crap.
No. That was.
You know it's on your top playlist, DJ.
No, I'm not. You can do one like. Look, no. Like I just clicked on the up next thing. Like I pressed back.
Nick still have you too coming on.
No. Like, come on,
every week I get a little bit
I've
more
got an education uphold here, okay? Yeah, Billy, fuck off, all right? I've got about 40 tabs open and a shit laptop. Give me a break, all right? But anyway, right, share the screen again. We won't have that issue. Clive, you're banned from my stream for saying that about me. Right, okay. We'll just do it this way instead. Right.
Murder of George Floyd in 2020 and the rise of the Black Lives Matter movement, children and young people in Scotland met with the Deputy First Minister to make their voices heard and share their lived experiences of racism. Young people explained that teachers should think about how to better reflect Black and minority ethnic history and experience, as well as the importance of tackling racism in society today. From this meeting, the Scottish Government set up a race equality and anti-racism in education programme with a focus on 4 areas. 1. Education leadership and professional learning. 2. Curriculum reform. 3. Diversity in the teaching profession and education workforce. And 4. Racism and racist incidents. Listening to the experiences of children, young people, and the guidance of the programme board, Education Scotland worked with partners to create professional learning for Scotland's educators to build their racial literacy. That means making a learning programme for teachers and practitioners to build their anti-racist skills and to increase their awareness of the impact of race on the learners, families, and communities they support. The first version of the Building Racial Literacy programme started in January 2022. It has been designed by partners with a strong influence in education and a wealth of anti-racist knowledge, including the Scottish Association of Minority Ethnic Educators, the Coalition for Racial Equality and Rights, the Scottish Development Education Centres, Third Generation Project, and others. Over 80 educators are learning together how to be anti-racist. They work in nurseries, early learning and childcare settings, primary and secondary schools, third sector organisation, local authorities, and universities. One of the aims of the programme is to make people working in education less race evasive. That means that educators don't avoid talking about race. Instead of ignoring racism, they feel confident challenging racism and helping those who experience it. On the programme, we've been listening to children and young people's experiences of race in Scottish education, finding out what they would like to see us doing differently, learning about our own racial identity and how this might impact our teaching practice day to day, sharing good practices and ideas, and planning our own individual anti-racist action plans. I hadn't imagined some of the experiences of people of colour. I was quite taken aback about how I hadn't considered certain things, such as how a child of colour might feel in a class of white people.
That was a bit of an introduction. The first video that they pumped out. There's been many since then. They're quite hard to obtain, admittedly, because they're all unlisted. But I have a few on Telegram. But I don't know if you've picked up on that. There was quite a lot to take in there. But they mentioned nursery. They've even got them in nursery settings. It's just, I find the entirety of it repulsive from start to finish, really, because this comes into the context of, when they say they're anti-racist, what do we mean? Because they've got a myriad of different definitions for what is racist these days. Everything from white people for being white, all the way to our systems, our structures. Disparities are proof of racism. Everything is racist at this point. So when you realize that, then all of a sudden the term anti-racist doesn't appear as innocuous as it ordinarily would have done. You know, as I said, I've got their old website, which has got a plethora of different definitions of racism. But nursery age children, early learning, they've even got them in there now. And when they spoke about the action plan, I've got screenshots somewhere of one of these teachers took photos of their action plan. And one of the things that they have to do as part of their action plan is create an anti-racist school club. Now, I've already made a video on this. They've released a webinar session that they did with a bunch of children who were participating in their local anti-racist school club. But again, bear in mind that these are teachers that are being put through a Scottish government-funded programme that was created by critical race theorists under the guise of anti-racism. And once they complete the programme, they're on their learning journey towards being racially literate, aka, they're pretty well clued up in all things critical race theory. And then they have to make a school club to encourage children in the vicinity of said school to participate. And parents at home and whatnot, all they hear is the term anti-racist. They don't really seem to, you can't really blame some of them. Maybe they just hear the term and they don't think there's anything untoward. But the reality of the matter is, you scratch beneath the surface and it all becomes clear that children are being effectively groomed into participating in quote-unquote anti-racist school clubs. Not just one example of many I could throw up. And what's really going on there, though, is they're learning all about the different definitions of racism. They're learning all about disparities and inequity and why it all comes to equity, etc., etc., etc. It's just brainwashing from start to finish. And I think it's absolutely repulsive that we have a Scottish government who are pumping taxpayers' money into this and not telling the public absolutely anything about it because it's all hidden behind their metaphorical paywall. That's my 2 cents on that. But yeah.
It's just they keep trying to create an issue and a problem. This is very postmodern. Problematize a situation. So if you name it and label it, then you problematize it. It becomes an issue. It becomes like so that these little, and of course, this is why they do it with children, because the children are very, very they're like sponges. They soak this up, but it's extremely problematic because it basically creates a generation walking in eggshells. I mean, when I was at school, we never got critical race theory. In my school, it was completely white. There was one Chinese boy. His parents had the Chinese restaurant in the town, and I was at primary school with him as well. I was pretty friendly with him actually, and but that was with it in the town. That was with it, and but then a black guy came to the school, and I was in a few classes with him, and he, as far as I recall, he was pretty popular actually, and I don't recall because we never had critical race theory. There was a massive racism problem in the school, and it makes you wonder. I mean, many years ago when I was doing my degree in psychology, I did some modules in education at Stirling Uni, and essentially the education was very leftist then. It was really, really socialist, communist orientated. But basically, all the education lecturers were saying how labeling people with certain issues, singling them out as being different, as whatever it is, whatever it was very negative, had a negative impact on the child to do that. But what the leftists seem to be doing now is the complete opposite. They want to they want to label children as having something now. So if it's not sort of a racist bias, or it's an anti-LGBT bias or an anti-feminist bias, it's you see that they've went from labeling is bad to labeling is good.
Yeah, and on top of that as well, like just when you mentioned that there, when I was growing up in the Highlands, like I think there was one Indian kid in like primary 7, I think. It was either first year or primary 7, but all my school photos and that class was white. It wasn't even like British, it was just all Scottish. Never had to think about this stuff at all. It was just not a thing here. But even that is now a problem. Where on their, they say it openly. I've got videos of them saying it or alluding to it, and it's even on their old website, where they even say now that colorblind societies are problematic. So the very thing that most people here were sort of groomed over the generations to become more susceptible to, i.e., don't be sort of ethnocentric, treat everybody as an individual, etc., etc. They promoted this individualism on people for generations, and then when they were more susceptible to that, now they're turning around and saying that that's problematic and racist. They literally say that on their website. So if you're quote unquote colorblind, or you live in a colorblind society, that in and of itself is racist. I don't know. You just can't win. You really can't win. But I'll let Clive jump in before I move on to the tabs. How's it going, Mr. Clive Chance?
Evening, boys.
Hello, Chair. How are you doing?
Hi, all right.
I
was just curious listening to that video when they said about thinking of the impact of the child being the only minority in the classroom.
Mm-hmm.
But then there was like good citizens like us pointing out that one white boy in the class full of minorities, and then somehow that's white supremacy and justifies the critical race theory. Like, it's funny how that works. Like, when it's in reverse, it's not so important.
Yeah, because Khadija Mohammed mentions that I was the only black and ethnic minority teacher, in making like this was like an issue, So it's like, yeah, how does it work? How does it work? It's like one rule for them and one rule for us people with the affliction of whiteness.
Aye, so don't notice, but if you do, it's white supremacy. But you teach your children to notice minority. It's so confusing to try and keep up. But I've got a question just to throw out to all of you. But how much of this critical race theory stuff do you think is like a well thought out strategy? Like they're pre-programming kids to feel guilt and not to question the transformation of their countries? Because historically it was a big emphasis on colourblindness, which does make sense when maybe you've got one or two like minorities in a school or like one minority in a classroom. Like that kind of approach makes sense. But when there's this massive transformation, colourblindness will not work out too well. They need guilt.
Let me show you this. This was for later on, but this is on one of the websites that the Scottish Government promote. A curriculum which reflects diversity, right? And we just come down here a bit and it says, a curriculum which represents everyone involves normalizing diversity within the curriculum so that learners routinely see language, content, and imagery that reflects the diversity of culture, identities, and experiences, including their own. This normalizing is more powerful than one-off lessons that explore diversity or celebrate difference. The latter can have the unintended consequence of othering those who are not from the ethnic group, which is in the majority. Right, but there's a section just coming down here that I find very odious. As celebrating difference may reinforce stereotypes, careful consideration is advised. But this bit here, right? normalizing diversity within the curriculum, as opposed to normalizing the white majority ethnic group, gives every learner the important message of being valued and belonging. So effectively, what that says to me is that we have to eradicate the concept of normality in this case, Scotland, where it's normal to assume that Scotland's majority white. We have to stop normalizing that and instead promote diversity. So, you know, like that's polar opposite to this colorblind society. No, we need to do the polar opposite to that now, and we need to promote to high heaven diversity. First, another question was, when has this ever been a thing? When was there ever a process put into place to normalize the white majority ethnic group in a Scottish context? It just goes without saying, but that's a problem now, according to these people. That has to change because it's wrong to do that. That could lead to othering. We need to promote diversity instead. I just think that is I don't know what you think about that. Maybe I'm reading too much into that little statement there, but I think that is one of the most grotesque sentences I've come across in some time.
Yeah, it again, it's just this kind of postmodern thing of if you turn the language around and say that they're abnormalizing the white majority ethnic group with this kind of policy, these teaching policies, building racial literacy. They use the same for the LGBT stuff. It's interrogating heteronormativity, and so they're interrogating whiteness in school to make it a problem. And it's not they've got all these things, the LGBT stuff in schools, the critical race theory, the feminist ideology in schools, in mental health stuff. And children are more disturbed today than they were in decades ago. I mean, I'm thinking of my grandfather. He grew up in Glasgow in the 1920s in the Gorbals, in absolute poverty his family was in. He left school very young. He never got critical race theory or LGBT inclusive education or any of that. He grew up. He was a hard worker. He fought in World War II. He was just a working class man. He was a window cleaner for a lot of his life, and he was a man of manners. He sang in the choir. In his time in the army and stuff, he was amongst a lot of people from different ethnic backgrounds. But he never had a racist bone in his body. So it's like very strange how we need all these initiatives. But for some reason, in the olden days when they never had all this stuff, people seem to get along quite fine.
Yeah, when it's like things happen organically or naturally, there's less tension, so to speak. But I think part of the problem is the forcing all these things now, and with that means that you need to initiate programs which they claim are going to help the initiation program or the introductory process, I should say. But just funnily enough, there's microaggressions too. But I wanted to just highlight this individual here. This is what I was on about earlier on. This is on Education Scotland's website. What is racial literacy? Building racial literacy program refers primarily to France Wooden-Twine's definition as a form of anti-racist training with the recognition of racism as a contemporary, not just historical problem, and consideration of intersectionality, the way racism intersects with other factors such as class and gender, the development of language to discuss race, racism, and anti-racism, the ability to decode race and racial microaggressions. If you take this person's name here, right, the sort of bullshit this person publicizes or publicates even, the future of whiteness, a map of the third wave, right? Or another one here, a white side of Black Britain, the concept of racial literacy. And I mean, some of the stuff that's written in these publications, they're absolute crackpots. Like legit, absolute crackpots. So if anybody was not of the belief that there's critical race theory that's been introduced slowly and covertly behind the scenes in Scotland, then, well, here's the proof right here. The Building Racial Literacy Programme is predicated by and large on the concepts that have been written about by this woman here, France Wooden-Twine, a black woman, of course. Well, of course she's going to be black. They always are. But yeah. And I made a video on this a couple of weeks ago, and I just went through some of it. I mean, a lot of it's just mumbo jumbo. And yes, this is my mother's laptop, so you can laugh at my fucking screensaver. But, it's not my laptop, like. But
Mate, do you listen to Coldplay while looking at your screensaver?
oh, there you go, man. Fucking nah. But I'll see if I can find some of the crap pop stuff and like I need to charge.
I'll just very quickly say that I always say the same thing. Probably pre-Blair era Britain. I think we was probably as colourblind as you're going to get. And to say colourblind now, that's racism. It's just like globalist isn't, according to some LBC shill, is now anti-Semitic for whatever reason. No, globalists, as far as I'm concerned, are interferers. I don't care what demographic they're from or what, religion or race or whatever. I just don't want to be interfered with. But the whole point is that, in the sort of 50s and 60s, when the equality and race movements were going on, which a lot of them was CIA ops, especially in the United States. That probably took 20 years. So by the mid 80s, sort of mid to late 80s, it was having an effect, and people were generally just getting on. People didn't really see. We'd been educated to be colorblind, but then the orchestrators of our doom, in other words, these globalist idiots, and I mean that in the sense of interference, global interference. They realised that, hold on a minute, we can't have this. People are getting on now. That means that, if they look over the shoulder and see who's shaking the ant jar, if they look over the shoulder and see who's actually shaking the ant jar, they could actually group together and basically have us all hanging from our toes in various courtyards in various countries, which is where they actually deserve to be, in fairness, the absolute hateful creatures that they are. So then all this crap came back out again, once again, to start telling certain groups who'd never had it so good, it doesn't matter their background or their heritage, by virtue of being in this country, they had compared to what it would have been, let's say, if they remained in their countries of origin, they had a great life, you know what I mean? And, we are a good-natured and relatively tolerant nation, and they've weaponized that against us. But when we started, when it started to look as though people were just getting on, I'm not going to say everybody loved everybody. I'm just going to say people generally got on, didn't see things in those terms anymore. The system couldn't have that because they don't want people to collectivize. So all of this shite, and you're quite right what you're saying, the Communist Manifesto stuff and cultural Marxism stuff is all designed to keep on subdividing people into smaller groups. So men against women, straight against gay, black against white, because the only thing that the globalists fear are numbers. So if there's one cohesive cohort of people who decide one day, something, right? I'm fed up of every frigging thing that's going on in my country being driven by shit that's being discussed in Davos. I tell you what, let's go and march on Davos. Doesn't matter how many bullets he's got. He hasn't got 100 million of them. Let's go and have a word with old Klaus boy, in person. They shit themselves. The old Frankenstein, the villagers chasing Frankenstein's monster. They absolutely shit themselves over over that actually happening to them, getting Ceausescu basically. So they have to use everything in their power. And once again, they found that, carrot and stick really doesn't tend to work. So what they have to do is use the psychology, which is why time and time again, irrespective of the narrative or irrespective of the crisis, everything's a crisis these days, all of the people who are involved in pushing what the system wants, the globalist system wants, the vast majority of them are behavioral psychologists and social engineers, because they are the ones who they know can garner the most influence across the wider ranging people, because a lot of people just watch the Idiot Lantern all day, every day, and a lot of them are glued to the TV watching our national channel, the BBC. So they just get subliminally, like I say, Manchurian candidated on a nationwide scale. That's, like I say, that's just my opinion. But it seems to me that they want to segregate us, or sorry, not segregate, but separate us divide us into smaller and smaller groups of cohesion, so that there can't be one single unit that could challenge the power base of the evil demons that are doing all this to us.
I agree and somewhat disagree in a way. I think all this critical race theory, the manipulation of media and all the kind of drip feeding they're doing everywhere is more of a getting in front of the inevitable. So when you talk about the great replacement or the demographic change, I think all these things are put in place to try and soften the blow, whereas there could be a realistic uprising if all that thing weren't in place. And I think it's more to quell us than the rest of the population, if that makes sense. So it's more targeted at the ethnic majority than it being a divide and conquer across the board.
Aye. So it's just one of many different things that they've got effectively in place. If you think about it, near enough every single thing that they're doing, irrespective of whether it's critical race theory or their feminist nonsense, etc., it's more geared towards targeting white boys, because white boys inevitably grow up to be white men. Like, I mean, I don't really know. So that might not be something that everybody agrees with me on, but that's what I think it is, because it's not little white girls that are being demonized, it's little white boys, and it's not little white girls that are being negatively affected in our ever increasingly feminized education system. No, in fact, they're doing a lot better than they ordinarily would have been doing, because it's all geared towards them. It's white boys. Everything is about, it talks, even all the shit about Helena Kennedy with the feminist report, the groundbreaking, earth-shattering report, where they even justified why misogyny is not included within the publication and whatnot. Like, there's nothing in there about little girls. It's all about boys, and boys need to change the outdated stereotypes that lead that we're all inherently misogynistic. So we need to effectively go after little white boys as young as possible to change their mindsets. So everything's talks. It's all geared toward little white boys.
It's like feminize them and then drug them into oblivion because they're a bit too boisterous, and even if it was truly about helping the oppressed and the people that are underperforming,
then they'd be white boys now.
They'd be in that category, and there would be some group in Parliament that are representing like young white boys that are failing.
Exactly, and I mean, they're a classic example that just sprung to mind. I remember that, what's his name, Stormzy, when he had that couple of million put away to get black kids scholarships, but then a white guy wanted to do, a white professor wanted to do the same thing for white boys that were, from working class areas that were being left behind. He wasn't allowed. Racist.
Did that Milo Yiannopoulos way back in the day try and do that, and it was shut down? It was like scholarships for white people.
I think so.
It didn't. Well, I might be misremembering. I don't know if he ended up keeping the money and scamming people, or if it was just no, you can't do that.
I just wanted to show this. I mean, there's so much waffle in these publications, but my point is though that this is the woman that's been quoted a few times for the justification. This is where the Building Racial Literacy program is derivative from her idea, or partly her ideology. I know she's not the one that's responsible for critical race theory in and of itself, but even this little paragraph here: white supremacy in concert with early modern capitalism cemented in place a two-tiered, mutually reinforcing system of material and psychological oppression that's painfully evident throughout the globe. Unlike the rather obvious patterns of the discrimination and legally sanctioned state-sponsored terror that characterize much of US history, contemporary discursive accounts of race and whiteness serve to make the material benefits of whiteness appear normal, natural, and remarkable. Third-wave whiteness is an attempt to make the privileges associated with whiteness conscious by illustrating how white advantage are maintained through various ideological narratives, presumably. Narratives. These accounts include how colorblindness as a political ideology is increasingly used to negate institutional racism or state reforms. Colorblindness, and I mean, as I say, there's reference to that in the Anti-Racist Educator and their glossary. if you come to racism. I'm pretty sure it should be in the racism section. But as I say, this is the website where these people started off when they were once upon a time deemed as fringe, and now they're sitting on Scottish Government panels promoting all this bullshit. But there is, I'll find it. If I can't find it in real time, I will find it, because they do make reference to how colorblindness is problematic. But I mean, this is what we're dealing with here, where they're defining racism as white supremacist systems of oppression based on race, system of advantage based on race, racial prejudice, or race prejudice, sorry, and social and institutional power, and all this bollocks. But you know, I've gone through this before, but just you've got environmental racism, racial capitalism, cultural racism, scientific racism, theological racism, systemic racism, institutional racism, internalized racism, and interpersonal racism. You know, I mean, the list is forever growing. It's growing arms and legs. But they've got other things that are pretty egregious on this website. You've got white fragility. You've got whiteness, you know. In anti-racist work, white people refers to a socially constructed identity based on skin color. Rather than an identity, whiteness is a racial discourse that privileges white people and that asserts white people as the norm. Whiteness is reflected in the people's thoughts, actions, and in the functions, outcomes, and institutions and systems. This means that white people can disassociate from whiteness when they commit to anti-racism. Similarly, people of color can aspire and endorse whiteness when their thoughts and actions privilege white people, whether it's conscious or not. You know, just another one quickly, white fragility. I wonder what that'll be about. I wonder. And then they quote Robin DiAngelo. Oh, yeah. She coined the term white fragility to describe the state in which even a minimum amount of racial stress becomes intolerable for white people. I find this laughable that they speak about us in such a manner when they're the ones that cry like little girls when they're talking about microaggressions, as if they even fucking exist. I mean, who's the fragile one here? However, you know, you get the point that these people, just for anybody that's new here and has not seen this stuff, these people, this old website has got all the same people down here. All the same people, her there, Melina, and she's the main one. All of these people that are included within this are on all these panels. Him, he's the guy that thinks maps are racist. Don't ask if you don't know what I'm talking about. He's on. I'm sure I've seen him on one, but I could be wrong. He's another one. He's a geography teacher who thinks geography is racist. Nagit Riaz, ex SNP. You know, these people, they're all now working with the Scottish Government. But if you want a bit of insight as to what they believe, just look for this website. It's absolutely disgusting. Like, it's abhorrent. The resources, we've gone through this before, I have anyway. They've got school resources. You can listen to their podcasts. You can watch some of their daft videos. They've even got a white privilege test on this website that I'm proud to announce I passed with flying colours, apparently. But yeah.
You know, what I hope that people who are listening, you know, and especially if they're parents, if they're listening to that, read what you read out there, the language is the disdain they hold for you know, that this is the fact that some people are white, but the fact is these people are going into schools to target children, you know, people's children, with this gobbledygook ideology, postmodern soup, you know, and making out there's some sort of issue. And, you know, parents have to really get active and start challenging it, because, you know, to go in and tell little Johnny or little Jill, little white boy or girl, that you know, they've got some sort of inherent racial whiteness illness, which is essentially what they're saying. You know, it's a form of abuse to do that. How, you know, to tell someone there's something wrong with them, you know, something inherently, you know, some deep fault in them, you know, that has to be ironed out with their postmodern wisdom. You know, it's really, really, you know, can you imagine if they came up to you in the street he went, "Oh, hello," and looked at a little white boy and went, "You got racism in you. You got racism in you." You know what I think. You know that's essentially what they're doing.
Yeah.
That is what they're saying, and the kind of tactic they use is like the mafia style shakedown tactic, where it's like, be a shame if anything happened to your career, you little racist. You must be an ally and anti-racist to get away from this sin that you're born with. Like, it's fucking disgusting. But I thought it was funny, like when you were reading out that retarded women's, like whatever that is, like I don't even know what that was, DJ, to be honest. But when she said color blindness is racism, but also white people invented race to oppress minorities. So whiteness was invented by us to oppress people, but they're certainly keeping it in life support, so they've got something to complain about. They don't make any sense, and as Bruce pointed out, as if they go to like university, they just learn all this postmodern gobbledygook and then just repeat it. I don't know if any of you watched that Atheism is Unstoppable guy when he was on YouTube, but he used to always like kind of slag off the kind of the newspeak that they use, and it's like what was it he used to say? It was like systemic systems of institutional oppression or something like that. He used like some mad buzzword that he made up to kind of show how retarded these arguments are that they use. And I don't know, I just always laughed at it because it is, anytime you listen to them, it's all just word salad.
No, you're not wrong. Wait, I need to find that. Just where the fuck was it? I mean, I've seen it so many times and I've covered it so many times in passing. They do literally make reference to it being problematic. I'm just trying to think, colour blindness.
No, I mean, I've heard that before, like for these CRT activists, where they do mention that being colourblind isn't enough. You must be actively anti-racist, which means you need to kiss our boots. Like, do you remember the video of the Black Hebrew Israelites? There was a few of them for different members going about where all these white people were kissing their boots to say sorry for history.
Yeah,
like that's basically what being an anti-racist white person is you're kissing
Well,
the boots.
I'll tell you what, mate. I'd tell him to kiss my ass. I'll tell you what, they couldn't mean.
100%.
Wait. Here we go. Got it. Right. And funnily enough, it was on the racial literacy section. I should have really gone there first. But I'll just share this quickly. For anybody that's not seen this, like, I mean, it's just fascinating, this website, really. I mean, it's pretty odious, admittedly, but that said, it's probably a good way to start yourself off if you're really trying to figure out what these people are about, because all their material, I mean, I would advise them to take their website down if they're trying to keep this a secret. Like, they're not doing a very good job, admittedly, but there's it here. So just this racial literacy, racial consciousness, but down here it says, it's common in the West where people are taught from a very young age that everybody is equal. Race does not matter, and everybody adopts a colorblind lens, stops seeing race in brackets, then racism will disappear. Racial illiteracy is hugely problematic. So effectively what they're saying now is if you see the world through the lens of colorblindness, etc., you're racially illiterate. You know, you need to be re-educated so you can become racially literate, you know, and that involves understanding all the different definitions of racism and understanding that the system in and of itself is racist, etc., etc., etc.
But again, why would they want to be literate in race when race was invented by white people to oppress them? Surely their aim is for us to go back before the white supremacists invented race and just see everyone as people. Surely that's the goal. That should be the goal.
Well, you would think, but you know, racial literacy involves adopting a more nuanced understanding of race. It takes time to develop and is a lifelong project. Learning more about structural racism, critical race theory, and white fragility are great places to start. Listening to marginalized voices of color is crucial. Taking time to explore the anti-racist educator platform, notably the blog and the glossary, should equally ensure an increase in racial consciousness in a Scottish context. All right, so Waffle, yes, but at the same time, there is quite clearly an element of malevolence at play here. And as I said, this website, just you would classify these people, well, I did when I stumbled across it years ago. They were just fringe, just whack jobs. But the whack jobs that are now literally working with the Scottish government, you know, it's kind of going full circle to the start of the stream, I pointed out that they're literally sitting on panels with the intention of reforming our curriculum. You know,
you've to listen.
And reforming the children. That's essentially what they're wanting to formulate the children. I mean, the postmodern gobbledygook, it has a cult-like quality to it, because you can turn anything you want into anything you want. I mean, that article that he said that I read, the France Wiggins Twine and Charles Gallagher, the future of whiteness, a map of the third wave. In the conclusion, there's a few lines. I'll need to read it out, because this is the state of the postmodern gobbledygook and how they got to apply it to children. While water, this is what it says, while water is a fluid state, at a certain contingent moment under 32 degrees, it is transformed into a solid state, ice. This is an easy binary formulation, but things get more complicated, because when H2O at still another moment boils, it begins to vaporize or evaporate. Race, like H2O, can take many forms, but unlike H2O, it can transform itself in a nanosecond. It takes time for ice to boil and for vapor to condense and freeze, but race can be simultaneously Janus-faced and multifaceted, and also produce a singularly dominant social hierarchy. You know, that sort of nonsense has no place in child's education.
No, I don't even think it's got any place in my life. I don't even know what half of that meant. Well, God, as you say, yeah. But I don't know. I mean, I'm a bit baffled by that one, to be honest. I'm still trying to process that.
Mate, you don't understand it because of your inherent white supremacy that you're born with.
You know, it might be. You might be right. And it's just, I haven't topped up my microaggressions in a while. I'm needing a refill as well, so could be running on empty. I don't know.
And I just think it's funny that these people, as you say, they've got access to the powers that run Scotland that are then dictating the curriculum. There's also all these essentially affirmative action things in place in Scotland, not just in workplaces, but also in government, where all these oppressed minorities are given preferential treatment and put in winnable seats so that they can then govern the people. But then these are the people complaining about being oppressed. Well, time and time again, it shows that young white boys are the worst performing. They are now the ones that are discriminated against when it comes to job applications, college placements, university placements, all because of this critical race theory bullshit that is kind of brainwashed the West into believing that these young boys, just for being born with the pigmentation they have, they're somehow evil. It's completely backwards.
Mm-hmm. And this is, I just wanted to say as well, for anybody that's new here, this is the end product. I did make reference to earlier on, their action plans. They now need to have their wee anti-racist school clubs. Well, this is an unlisted video on Education Scotland's YouTube channel, and the title of the video is Anti-Racist School Clubs. Yeah, it's literally a thing now. And there's there, Melina, the same woman who was the main front runner who made that website, the Anti-Racist Educator, the same woman who's sitting on Education Scotland's panel as one of the head honchos, same woman who said some pretty grotesque things in the past pertaining to white tears, a concept she created herself, etc. But this shit.
Made me realise that I also was a member of Anti-Racist Educator in Scotland. You can use the QR code that's on the screen or follow the chat pane link that's been posted.
We meet every week at lunch, just once a week, and it's fairly informal, so it feels more comfortable when you're talking about different racial problems. Our main goals are to spread awareness, not only about talking about racism, but being confident in talking.
I never saw Stevie Wonder without sunglasses on. Why does he just wear normal glasses? you see what I'm talking about?
That fucking thing.
Aye.
Oh, wait, well, that walrus, by the way.
Put
Oh,
the glasses
no.
back on, Stevie. You look a bit.
Fucking hell, mate. But she does speak at this point. Okay. There's a, oh, Jesus, look at that. But I mean, they're just like indoctrinating kids into these anti-racist school clubs, and they're just sat there so matter-of-factly explaining what they get up to. I just find this the most insidious thing.
She does look the
Talking
type
about
to be
racism.
part of an anti-racist school club, to be honest.
No, I mean, wait till you see this one, though. I'll get it. We're getting there. Where is she? Oh, Jesus Christ. Oh, there we go. Just for you.
Case for students who experience racism to be able to know that they've got somewhere to turn, they've got some people that they know are available, and they know kind of understand their experiences and are empathetic towards them. But actually, the club has become so much more than that, because it's caught lots and lots of young people who feel really strongly about a range of issues, actually, and it's allowed them to become friends with each other. It's allowed them to strengthen their voices, and we've worked really hard on that kind of allowing young people to believe that they are change makers and that we are going to be able to shape the world into the place that we want it to be. So I think the most important bit for us has been that now our young people hopefully feel like they are activists themselves, that they feel empowered about taking this work forward.
That alone, I'm assuming this is a teacher.
Yeah.
The teacher's got a pride flag, the retarded fucking tranny black and minority pride flag in the background. She's actively talking about students becoming activists. This person should not be near children. And could you imagine sitting in a class? You're in Scotland, I'm assuming Scotland, but she's
Glasgow.
She's another, what do you call it? What's his name? Campbell.
Aye. New Scott.
Whatever his name is, fucking Jamaican.
Graham.
Man. Aye. She's another one, an English accent of a different complexion. But could you imagine sitting in a Scottish school? You're just like, you probably see a white faces, and you're just getting lectured to by this mixed race English / whatever woman a tranny flag in the background about you've been born evil. You'd be like, can you just fuck off? Just teach me my ABCs, my 1, 2, 3s, and something interesting.
But this is all of the plan. This is the bio-Leninism at work, whereby they will over-promote people who, in the past, would have been, basically, a lot of them would have ended up in asylums. A lot of these nutcases that are going around now, they're being lionized, and a lot of people who ordinarily would have been eschewed or, shamed or whatever in society, the outcasts of society. The Marxism, the bio-Leninism and, cultural Marxism side of it over promotes these people because they have far more investment in the system and the status quo now. So they will fight tooth and nail to maintain it. Because if the old order ever got back into power, these fuckers are out on the rear, basically. Apologies for swearing there, but, nobody in the right mind, would take this fucking cacodemon serious, 20, 30 years ago. But now they're over-promoted, because, like I say, they'll push the narrative and they'll defend it to the hilt because it is the current narrative, the bio-Leninism influence narrative that allows them to maintain those positions of influence. So they'll fight tooth and nail not to end up back in the bloody asylum or wherever, or not being bloody promoted in society, because that would have been the normal. That would have been the norm.
I'm interested in Bruce's take on student activists and teachers promoting any form of activism.
Well, I was just thinking when I was at school, high school, I remember my English teacher talking about teachers having certain political affiliations, ideas. And he says, as a teacher, I am not. I remember distinctly him saying, I'm not allowed to try to influence what my politics are. So I'm not going. So because someone said, "What are you voting?" or something on one of the elections. He said, I'm not telling you what I'm voting for, because I don't want to influence you one way or the other, or try to persuade you to vote, or think politically in a certain way. That's I'm not allowed to do that. So it's completely it's in the last few decades, it's completely changed now. But this teacher in that video there, I mean, she's basically celebrating the fact that she's an activist, and she's creating a little Marxist activist camp in the school. I mean, it's terrible.
They're all doing it. Like, that's what I'm saying. Their action plan, like, they all have to do it. I've got another video here. I uploaded this the other day. It's Heard again, by the way. Heard and another one who I think is actually more arguably disgusting, because she works with autistic children and she's promoting the exact same shit, but to autistic children. But I'll share this just for anybody that's not seen this. I won't play the whole thing, but just so you get a bit of an idea here. This is them justifying their anti-racist school clubs and decolonizing the curriculum. So there's that, I guess. But this is what I'm saying. This has gone from initially an SNP manifesto pledge in 2021, and it is seriously snowballing, and it's going relatively unnoticed by and large, because people can't seem to, for whatever reason, see past the term anti-racist. It's not what we're talking about here. It's not what they're talking about, clearly. But yeah, that's here.
I'd like to introduce ourselves. My name is Angel Hinckley, and I am the principal teacher of equity at John Chapel High School. And we have the amazing Gemma Waters, who is the principal teacher of equity at Smithycroft. And we both love and are passionate about decolonising the curriculum. So I really hope you enjoy this. I'd like to start off by saying that this is a safer and braver place. The reason we emphasise the word safer, as in the ER at the end, is that we're not actually in a place where there isn't discrimination, and that's when we would have a safe place. We are
again, wait, pause it. Sorry.
But
just the first bullet point, that race as a social construct built to legitimise treating groups of people inhumanely.
Yeah.
Well, again, they talk about colour blindness being racist and constantly harp on whiteness. So is that not treating people differently based on the colour of their skin? Is that not otherising that they talk about? That's a lot more than a microaggression that they talk about. Like, someone said they smell curry in the classroom, and I thought that was direct. You're like, shut up. But I mean, like, sorry, carry on.
Curriculum.
Curriculum.
I just want there's a bit here where she brings up colonialism. It's just ridiculous.
So when we say we're decolonising, what we're doing is we are looking at the white Western male perspective that education is built around. And we are trying to regress that balance. We're trying to put in extra perspectives to make it more relevant to young people today. And the last little thing is decolonising is not just about race. Colonialism had a lot of impact on the world. It increased our level of reliance on religion and lots of the things that go with that, such as our attitudes to gender, to sexual orientation and relationships. All of those things were impacted by colonialism. So when you are thinking about decolonising your curriculum, you shouldn't only be thinking about race, but also thinking about, actually, if I am teaching badminton, could I use examples from the Paralympics as well as the Olympics of people playing and how they use those same skills that able-bodied people would use? It's about having that moment of reflection on what you're doing and what can I add to this to make this just a little bit better.
Oh, so deep. You know, but anti-racist school clubs coming out of school near you, thanks to the SNP, of course. Yeah.
You know, what's striking about that video there is what I mentioned before about the globalism that's been adopted. You know, World Economic Forum, the Agenda 2030, United Nations. As you said, it's not just about race or colour, it's about gender, it's about sexual stereotypes, etc. It's all about deconstructing, as the Russian philosopher Dugan talks about, is deconstructing our world to homogenize everything, and so there'll be nothing left. And of course, I don't know if these critical race theorists realize it, but everyone's got to be homogenized, and they're got to be homogenized as well. You know, it's like so they're wanting to be erased. I thought that you shouldn't erase black and ethnic minorities. We should, you know, and I believe that we should. It's other cultures, other races. You know, it's the great diversity of the world. It's a good thing. Different things like that, different cultures, ideas. But the actual globalism wants to homogenize everything, and they don't realize that. This is what this postmodern is got to eventually erase. Nothing. There'll be no diversity. It'll be homogeny everywhere.
We've said this before, but it's like if you visit Glasgow, London, Paris, like all these big cities, it will just be the same shit. It will just be not even a melting pot, just conflict everywhere with all these different groups, and it's anti-diversity, as you're saying, Bruce. But
yeah,
the whole decolonising thing, again, I still think there is a whole global homo agenda, as Bruce is saying, but I still think all this stuff is about softening the blow for the inevitable demographic change, where it's to prevent any form of ethnic nationalism or any form of just recognising your group. So they talk about celebrating groups and differences and history and all that, unless it's ours, unless it's the nation they're currently trying to colonise. And it should really be called colonising the curriculum, because that's what they're doing. They're just rewriting history. They're framing it in a way that is to make us, the natives and our children, feel guilty. It's just brainwashing generations to just accept mass demographic replacement and just bend down to our new minority leaders.
It's like that thing I pulled up earlier on where it was on about not normalising the white majority and instead normalise diversity. That to me just screams out that they want to sort of get white kids used to the becoming an ever increasing minority in their own countries. That's what it's about to me. That's what it screams to me anyway. Screams out to me. But the last thing, I do have work in the morning, but the last thing I wanted to play, just on the subject of my favourite boo-boo, Melina, this was the first ever clip I actually got of her speaking. I played this before on stream, but I don't know if Bruce has seen it. I don't know if you've seen it, Clive, or anybody in the chat that's new here. You might not have seen it, but this is her sort of explaining or summarising her programme, the Building Racial Literacy programme, which is totally not critical race theory. No, of course not. So I'll put that in now, because I think more attention. I know it's a lot more difficult now that they privated their Twitters and stuff, but I think that the momentum cannot die, really. We need to keep our foot on the pedal, so to speak, because as things currently stand, they managed to escape the momentum that was headed their way for now, admittedly, but I ain't going to fucking stop. I've got too much stuff on them now anyway. My Telegram is full to the brim of a year's worth of BS from these people. They back the loser if they think blocking the Twitter now is going to protect him, really. But that said, yeah.
But guys, we've kind of set the scene here.
Pause, DJ, pause. You mean
You're gonna make a gay joke, aren't you?
No, you mean protect them against criticism.
Oh yeah.
Just in case Nicola's listening and she goes,
Oh, my
"We're-
favorite boo-boo Sarah. I love you, my girl.
we've got him, boys. We've got him."
Just out of interest, mate, does this lad sing? Does this lad sing "Never Gonna Give You Up" at the end?
Oh, fuck's sake!
Been Rick
Oh, yeah, right. I was going to say a naughty word.
And some of the kind of concerns that we're trying to address. There's been a huge amount of work done, which was recognised in the follow-up report, about trying to close that awareness gap in terms of racial literacy. Do you want to talk a wee bit about some of the work that you've done about anti-racism and building racial literacy across the country?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks. And thanks, Angel, for sharing that story. Angel is also a member, a participant on the Building Racial Literacy program, and we've got a couple already in the audience, so it's great to see so many people engaged. And yeah, I also had the same issue trying to set up an anti-racist club, but with pupils explaining why they thought anti-racist is actually really important and part of our social justice values. It eventually worked, so don't give up on the term anti-racist. So yeah, just to give you a bit of background on what's going in Scotland, the Building Racial Literacy program is a professional learning program prototype that has been co-constructed with a range of anti-racist organisations, including the Scottish Association for Minority Ethnic Educators, so with Gettr here, and it's part of the wider Scottish Government programme of work looking at race, equality and anti-racism in education. And this first iteration of this prototype programme is really designed to build the racial literacy of educators across Scotland. And what we mean by racial literacy, we're really looking at developing people's understanding of racism. And just to touch on the point about misconceptions about racism, there's still that misconception that racism is really about individual hate and prejudice, and it's usually intentional. And that wider systemic but also endemic nature of racism is misunderstood. There's a misunderstanding that racism is not really an issue in Scotland, it's more an issue in England or in the US, but not really in Scotland. So in this program, we're really trying to raise people's awareness of how racism works in Scotland, uplifting, amplifying those experiences of racism in Scottish education, so that educators become aware of how it can operate, even within their classrooms, often unintentionally because they're unaware. So it's about building their understanding, also building their confidence to practice, and embed anti-racist practice in their behaviours and processes, and build their confidence in racial dialogue. So really building their skills to talk about race with children, with young people, with staff, colleagues, parents and wider communities, because that is such an important skill if we want a fair society for all. And so as part of this prototype program, we wanted to have a range of different perspectives included in the first cohort. So we've had nominations through 27 different Scottish local authorities, so all the way from the Central Belt, down to the Central Belt, and all the way up to Orkney as well. So really diverse perspectives from different participants, and participants from early learning and childcare, community learning and development, primary schools, secondary schools, as well as local authority officers, managers, because that's what the Teaching in Diverse Scotland report identified. If we want to increase representation of Black, Asian, minority ethnic teachers in the Scottish profession, then we also need to make sure that local authority officers improve their understanding of how racism operates in Scotland and in Scottish institutions.
Wow. Right, before there's any serious commentary, what would you rate her out of 10?
No comment.
I'd say a solid.
Lass. I have to say she's a pretty lass. You have to admit that.
I'd say a solid.
She's got her head like a dagger in spanners, but.
Would you 8.6 is a fair score?
That's a bit high, mate. That's a bit high. But obviously, she, when you factor in the butterflies in the head factor, she does drop down to a 3.
Ignoring personality. If she's personality, she's a 1.
Oh, she's an 8. She's an 8. She's a solid 8, I'd say, yeah.
This is just misogynistic behaviour, boys.
No comment. No comment. I'm a
red-blooded men. You should try it, Coldplay boy.
I shows your screensaver again, big man. Rate him out of 10.
Oh, there you go. Like,
I wanted to say something. I was very struck the way she was talking. It was quite hypnotic. I don't know if she's had sort of professional training in some sort of neuro-linguistic processing or something like that. You know, it's very, you know, she was saying lots of words but not really saying much, and it was sort of almost intangible. But it slipped in. It always slips in the kind of the really the dangerous aspect of this. It's like she insinuated that teachers are not aware of the racism or their unconscious bias, essentially. And it's like, they're mystifying. It's almost like hypnosis. They're mystifying people all the time. And they're sitting on these groups, planning groups, and teacher training. It's mystification at the highest level. You know, I think it's extremely worrying.
Aye, because the whole representation argument that they use, like she was talking about more minority teachers, is it basically falls down to that if it's a white teacher teaching any class that's got a minority in it, there's somehow going to be that bias there. They're going to favour the white students, and if there's a load of students calling like a wee guy a packy and throwing stones at him, like the teacher's just going to ignore that and say, "Oh, I didn't see that because my white children are amazing." You're like, none of that ever happens. You're chasing ghosts. Like they're basically ambulance chasers at this point. But all they're doing is trying to justify their government paycheck by using, as you said, Bruce, a million buzzwords. She said so much there. She hardly took a breath. Yeah. But there was no substance. It was just all the gobbledygook.
And she said it with a smile on her face. I thought it was very significant the way she sits, smiles, and like she's coming. Oh, I'm so sweet as she's presenting this. You know, as though there's no threat, there's no nefarious agenda behind this. But she slips in in her speech about unconscious bias, essentially. That the white people have unconscious bias. I mean, she never indicates that, you know, our brains are built the same. They never indicate that black and ethnic minorities have unconscious bias. So it's like the whites sin, but we don't sin. That kind of idea, and that which is ridiculous. I mean, I see everyone, whether you're black, brown, or whatever, we're all sinners, right? We're all equally able to sin. And if we do wrong things, like if we hurt another person, if we're nasty to them, well, then you deal. You know, in a school situation, you deal with it. You know, if someone's racist, you deal with it, or if someone's homophobic, and you deal with it on a case by case basis. You don't go around labeling someone because they're white that they've got some pathology in them. You know, that's just nonsense.
Basically, if you've got some white teacher or there's a majority white students, there's somehow going to be a problem there for minority students because of what we're born with. But I've lost my train of thought there. It just vanished from my head.
That's only my job.
The rhetoric that she comes out with, I think it does that to people. It makes people lose the train of thought. It's like it's almost hypnotizing the way they come out with it.
Well, the same can't be said for Kajida Muhammad, the way she speaks. Like, you know, this is the final clip of the night.
I think that's with Kajida Muhammad. I think that's why they put that other woman in place, as Bruce said, because she's a lot easier on the eyes, so you maybe will just stare at her and listen and go, okay, you're right.
I don't know what the hell is going on with Kajida Muhammad, if she's had a stroke or something, but my God. I mean,
one thing for sure, I wouldn't let her have a stroke.
No, yeah, would I? I'd rather cut it off. Well,
are you talking about Alf?
Sensum! I'm trying to play my video, Saxon. You will speak when spoken to, eh?
Are you talking
Shoot.
about
And one-
that woman who looks like Alf? Remember the TV thing? Is that the one?
Yeah.
Just DJ, just answer me one question, mate. What colour is that background he's sat in front of?
Cream?
No, it's a particular colour. It's not red or green. It's.
What? I don't know what you're talking about.
It looks a bit yellow.
It was all yellow.
Yellow.
Fuck off, you
wondering from your experience if the perceptions and the misconceptions look different in different parts of the country as well. I'm thinking about the difference between the kind of urban experience in Glasgow, Edinburgh, Dundee, Aberdeen compared to kind of more rural parts of the country. What are your thoughts around that?
Just unmute myself, Kevin. Yeah, absolutely, Kevin. In fact, while Rowena was speaking, I was thinking about the number of webinars where I've been speaking to head teachers across Scotland, and again that sort of geographical divide from the urban. And in fact, I was surprised at one session that I was doing, and some of the head teachers said, I asked them, why are you here? Why did you put yourself forward to attend the session? It was called Let's Talk About Race. And they were very honest, Kevin, in their remarks, and the majority of them were saying, we're here for tips. And I actually had to say, talking about racism and equity work knowing some tips aren't going to help much. But they also spoke about the challenges. So maybe that's something to say about their levels of racial literacy. And I know that a lot of the work that Melina and the sort of Building Racial Literacy Design Group have been working on that. But so again, that reminds me of perhaps that lack of language that they have to name and frame the issues if they're just looking for tips. And it's back to that point where Rowena saying that they're not seeing it from that systemic structural level. It's very much what am I going to do as an individual.
What?
Rewind a few seconds. Look at what our eye does.
I know, that's what I'm saying. It's like googly eyes, eh? I don't know what's fucking.
Oh, that's a perfect pause.
Great screening that.
Wait, did she always look like this? Is this pre or post vaccine? Is it?
I can get up on an old video of her.
No, I'm kidding. She always looked like this.
No, there was one from ages ago though where she won an award. And it's even worse spotlight. So that must have been when she first had Moderna.
Not seeing it from that systemic structural level. It's very much what am I going to do as an individual. But they also spoke about the fear that they had, Kevin, that they would be willing to have conversations in their school with their leadership team and the wider staff team and the young people for that matter around race. But they were worried about the pushback they would get from their parents. And that was more from the rural schools. So it's almost that almost all white communities thinking this is not something we need to be discussing because we've got no problem here, right? And actually, it's those very communities that we do need to have those conversations. So
yeah.
What makes me think when I watch these people talking about this? How much do they represent actual Black and ethnic minorities in Scotland? I mean, because I said that before, all the sort of stuff that they're pushing, this critical race theory and the people they're involved with, we're all globalists essentially, and they're wanting to homogenize the world, and because all these policies actually affect real people, Black and ethnic minorities, and other people as well. It makes me think that I spoke to some people during the pandemic, people from the Black and ethnic minority community, and they were slagging off Sturgeon. They were slagging off the lockdowns. They were slagging off the ridiculous nature of it. I know people, the Black and ethnic minorities, who think the LGBT stuff in schools is terrible and the trans stuff's terrible. They're not really representing the Black and ethnic minority communities. That's incredible.
I agree with that as well. In order for them to do that, then you'd have to be off the belief that every single BAME was pro-critical race theory, for example, just in that context, you know? Like, nah, these people are fringe. But the problem is, sadly, that, like, as I said, I found that
education.
Yeah, like that website, that anti-racist educator website, I found that years ago. It was the first one of these websites I ever came across. And I remember one of the videos that I made on it at the time. And I made the point of saying in that video that this was just, they're just whack jobs. But the reason I made the video in the first place was because it was based in Scotland. But I did make a point in that video saying that rest assured that if this continues, eventually you'll see these people in educational positions. Now you got Kajida Mohammed, for example, who's the convener of the General Teaching Council of Scotland, which sets the rules that every teacher in Scotland must obey. You've got Melina, another one, who now works as one of the head honchos of Education Scotland, working on every single panel going to reform our curriculum. You've got that other one, Nizut Utamani, who's another one who was once upon a time deemed fringe. She's a primary school teacher who promotes global citizenship, anti-racism, and sustainable development education. You know, there's another one, her name begins with an F, I can't remember, it's like Fatima or something. She's the one that... No, that's just that arsehole fucking the Aberdeen councillor. But I can't remember her name. But she did the publication called A. Adams Bairns, and if you read through that, it's a publication that's specifically targeted for teachers when they're a bit more racially literate, so they can start to implement their critical race theory bullshit in the classroom setting. Like she's on that anti-racist website from back in the day, and here she is now being promoted by the SNP with this publication that's just odious in nature. So the point is, though, that these people are still fringe effectively because they don't represent a majority of any capacity, but they're being propped up by our government as if they do represent the majority, which actually speaks volumes about the SNP or just the government in general, really. Why are they being plucked out of the herd of people that could be put in these positions? Like they're picking the most extreme of people and placing them into very influential positions, and nobody thought in a fucking eyelid, pardon my French. Oh, one last video I'm going to play as well.
To be fair, Kajida Mohammed batted a few eyelids.
She does pretty well, to be fair.
Is it okay? I'll need to log off now. Is that okay?
Well, I can end it now. I was just going to play this. I just wanted to show you're winning an award, you know? What the fuck?
Mate, just before you carry on, I just want to ask you, when you see Kajida Mohammed, do you say to yourself, I will try to fix you? No?
Do you know what, Clive? I'm going to ban you from your channel forevermore.
I'm a good singer, as you can tell. I'm the karaoke.
I'll leave that one for another day. I've heard it.
In relation to black and minority ethnic teachers.
Oh, shut up. Nah, you're all right. Right, fuck it. I mean, I do have work in the morning anyway, so I suppose that might be a good time to just wrap it up. Like, you know.
It's been good, but I think people should start challenging all this, what's going on, and your channel and other folks' channels. They should, because we're just ordinary folk, seeing what's going on in society, and I think it's important that we speak up.
No, I agree, and I think some of the things you pointed out, DJ, in your videos is the links that the curriculum has with all these extremists talking about basically how being born white is a sin, and then we've got the other things about conversion therapy bans. And I think if we put our heads together and figure out some strategy of highlighting this, I think it could probably go a long way. And I'll always stick by, and I think Bruce mentioned this earlier, is we need to get parents angry. We need to let them give them the information they need to what's actually happening, and that's when you'll see the mass protests. But definitely pointing out the huge activist links, and even the teacher you pointed out earlier who wants to create little activists. All these things are gold. A very effective way of just putting that in front of people's face and going, what do you think about that?
Yeah, that's what I've been saying for the longest time. People need to look past the anti-racist term. It's not what it is. That is just a facade. Same. I mean, I know it's a bit of a redundant comparison at this point, but it's the same principle with Antifa. Oh, we're just opposing fashion. No, you're not. Like that's not what you are. You can pretend that's all you are, all you want, but people know better if they've got more than two brain cells to rub together. They're not just simply opposing fascism. And the same principle applies here. It's not anti-racism that's been promoted quite clearly, even from some of the little things that have been pointed out tonight in the stream. A lot worse than simply opposing racism, you know. And this is the point that needs to be stressed.
Yeah, and I think the actual real black and ethnic minority community, you know, what do they think of what's happening in schools in Scotland? Because I know there's some people in the Scottish Family Party from the black and ethnic minority community who are quite horrified at what's going on in Scottish schools. You know, regarding the LGBT stuff, the mental health stuff and all that kind of stuff that's going on in schools, and values and global citizenship nonsense. I think if more and more parents of all races started realizing what's going on in the schools in Scotland, I think these fringe cultural Marxist critical race theorists would be, because it would be very good to have people from a black and ethnic minority community challenging them. They'll be really it'd be a really interesting confrontation that to see them being challenged. Someone from a Muslim community challenging them. You know.
Well, they've probably got explanations for that too, though. It'll be internalized race. You're only saying that because you've internalized it. You know.
I've heard the term internalized whiteness. I've heard that before, which is where minorities don't toe the line. It's basically calling them an Uncle Tom.
They do with women as well.
It's an academic way of saying Uncle Tom.
Yeah, the same as the internalized misogyny as well. If a lassie doesn't, buy into the feminist doctrine, then that's because she internalized misogyny from at a young age. You know, I've got an answer for everyone. But on that note, I'm just going to fire down the panel. If you've got anything to share or whatever, then fire on. I'll start with you, Clive, because the best comes last, and you are not the best.
Fair enough. To be fair, I've not got much to show. I do want to start doing kind of interviews again, and I will start making more content. I've just been really busy recently and a lot going on. So apologies for anyone waiting on anything, but I will continue at some point. But cheers for having me on. And cheers again, Bruce. It was nice talking to you again.
You too. Take care. And yes, I just think if parents especially should start looking at their local councils and see what's going on regarding this, and putting the ear out to see what parents' views are, because we have to start. I think we have to start challenging them on this very divisive policies, you know, because ultimately, ordinary people, right? Ordinary people, whether they're black or Chinese or whatever, people usually can get along very well without all this postmodern nonsense. So, and I think most ordinary people realise that. But these problematizers, critical race theorists, they're going out their way to create discord amongst everyone, and it's really not on. And they're ultimately, the worst thing is they're pathologizing little white kids, saying there's something wrong with them, and that is abhorrent. And that is actually it's abuse. So we have to start saying that they should have no place in school if they've got to be abusing children. That's what my 10 cents worth.
Absolutely agree. And I've been covering this shit all year, but obviously now I've got a wee boy. It's like I've got skin in the game now, so to speak. It just rubs me up even worse than it initially did, really, because I just think that it's not just targeting him, but it's targeting every child that's white, and I just think it's disgusting, really. But I find it even more grotesque now when I just continue every time something new pops up pertaining to these people. So they've said something else that's odious. I just get like a wee moment in my head where I picture them targeting my son with that shit, and it's not even for selfish reasons, because as I say, I've been doing it for the longest time for selfless reasons, but it irritates me even more now. I'm sure there's plenty of parents that'll feel the same when the time comes for them to find it out. And Sensum, Mr. Saxon, if you've got anything to shill or plug or whatever, then fire on, Gudgy.
I haven't, mate, no, but I'd just like to say it's been an absolute pleasure having Dr. Bruce on the stream tonight. Absolute magic stuff, and I would just recommend to people to sub to Bruce's channels, which are in the show notes on this video, his UK column and his Telegram links. Also great to have old third chair on for a change. And thanks, mate, for hosting the stream again, and I'll let you get back to your Coldplay fanboy chat group.
Fucking gonna battle you, by the way. Yeah, I mean, your card is marked, Mr. Sensom. But as for myself, I'm probably I am gonna go and I'm gonna change things up a bit now. I'm gonna go and put some Snow Patrol on, so get it up you. I don't know.
As long as it's not you two, you're all right.
No, I'm not that gay. But even I have standards, okay? But on that note, have a good week, folks. And if you're new here and whatnot, then honestly, I'd say, and you're interested in any of this stuff, just go and type in the anti-racist educator on Google or whatever. There's your starting point. Or fire me a message on Telegram, and I'll bombard your DMs with a myriad of wonderful links, including some Coldplay songs. And on that note, adios, amigos. Bye-bye.
Cheers. Bye-bye.
Bye now.
Bye.